Welcome to Public Speaking with Peter George. Do you want to be calm, confident, and credible every time you speak in public? Then stay tuned as Peter and his guests discuss public speaking tips, techniques, and tactics that help you increase your impact, influence, and income. Here's your host, the author of The Captivating Public Speaker, Peter George.
People often tell me they don't like their own voices. Well, what about you? Do you like your voice? Do you, or more importantly, do others find it compelling? Does it enhance your presentations or distract from them? In this episode, John Henny provides techniques that help you strengthen your communication skills and gain more confidence in your speaking voice. As a result, you eliminate strain and bring out your best-sounding, compelling voice. John has decades of experience helping thousands of voice users around the world become more effective communicators. He is a featured lecturer at top voice conferences and institutions, including Osborne Head and Neck Institute, VIP Worldwide Voice Conference, the Paul McCartney Liverpool Institute, and USC. The author of 3 Amazon best-selling books and host of the popular podcast, The Intelligent Vocalist, John coaches professional voice users at corporate businesses, the U.S. military, sports announcers, and voiceover artists. Here's my conversation with John Henny. Hey, John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure to have you here. John, why do most people not like the sound of their voice?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. And there's a couple of answers to it. The first one may be that your voice maybe is not operating at its best. So it's not particularly sounding great, although I believe everybody can have a fantastic sounding voice that's uniquely theirs. But it also has to do with the way that we hear our own voice. Our voice is being projected to others. So our experience of it is kind of like someone talking to us with their back to us. The sound waves are moving away from us. Nature compensates for that by conducting a certain amount of sound through bone to the inner ear. Bone conduction is friendlier to the lower frequencies. So our voice will tend to sound a bit warmer and deeper to ourselves. And then we hear a recording of ourselves and we think, oh my goodness, does that sound like me? It does sound like you. That's what you tend to sound like to others. But the good news is you can work with your voice to bring in that richer resonance so that everyone hears your voice that way.
Does that matter for us to have a lower resonance? Does it make a difference?
You know, it does. It's been said that lower voices tend to be perceived as carrying more authority. And the problem I see is people take this idea and they associate that with a lower speaking pitch. So you very often find people that speak on a very low speaking pitch. And what that does is that robs the voice of acoustic energy. The voice needs these higher frequencies to be able to cut and carry, certainly in larger spaces or above ambient noise. So what you can do is actually, if I just stay at the same pitch, if I'm talking here, I can change my resonance so it sounds like my voice is higher, or I can adjust my vocal track so my voice sounds deeper on the same pitch. And when you bring in more of those deeper, warmer tones in your voice, it can help carry more authority.
What might it be costing my listeners if they don't do something like that?
Well, it's not just that. It's your voice overall, and understanding that the voice is the carrier and connection of human emotion. They did a study at Yale where they took, I believe it was over 1,700 participants. And they had the participants try and understand what the other person was feeling in a conversation. And they did it where they could both see and hear the other person. Then it was only visual. So it was just body language. And then finally, it was voice only. And that's when their ability to really intuit what the other person was feeling went up. So the voice is the primary carrier of emotion. And when we neglect our voice and we neglect the power of the voice, it can cost you everything from influence to sales to promotions. Most decisions are emotional decisions, and then we'll go back retroactively and try and apply logic to them. If you can connect emotionally, you can move people.
Is this why people say, I can hear it in your voice?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you use your voice and I tend to look at the voice in a musical way, because I've for years just worked with singers, and I found what singers do in order to create an impactful performance. Many of these devices work for speakers as well. The fact is, we don't know which developed first, whether we sang first or we spoke first. They think maybe we kind of had this musical language that primarily expressed emotion. And then from there, we developed spoken language so we could get into deeper concepts. But emotion is always there in the voice. And if you learn to use it in a more musical way, to have a voice that's varied, carries some amount of melody, and then infuse it with emotional intention, you can be really compelling.
When you say melody, is that like when you hear a song and you can go along, even if you don't know the words yet, it might be the first time you hear it. Once you get that melody, you can go along with the song in your head. Is it the same way listening to a speaker?
Yes, but with speakers, right, in popular music, we have repetition.
Right.
And so we start to hear the melody or the hook and we can sing along with it. But singers, producers, musicians, they all know that they need to create little variances in these repetitions or it's going to start to sound rote. So speakers, you have to be very careful. If you fall into predictable patterns, people will tune out so quickly. It's like listening to Three Blind Mice on repeat. So, using melody, being able to use tempo where you can build up to a point, pull back a little bit, just vary your tone. All of these little elements can really help hold a listener's attention.
When you were saying that, I was thinking about Paul McCartney. And in live performances, Paul McCartney, when he has the chorus, anything he repeats, he changes a bit. He'll stress his voice. He'll go up high. He'll make it different, even though it's technically the same melody and the same words.
Yeah, Paul is such a brilliant vocalist. And as celebrated as he is, I almost think he's underrated as a singer because he's so brilliant and he has so many different colors in his voice. Paul can make his voice dark and warm on a song like Get Back. And then he can just tear it up with, rock and roll screams and then come to very soft sounds like in My Love. He's phenomenal. But he realizes that all of these little changes, everything makes a difference.
Getting a little off course here, but do you know the story of him singing "Oh Darling"?
I do, but go ahead and tell it. Maybe you know it a different way than I do.
The way I know it is he was looking for that gruff, gravelly sound and he couldn't get it. And what he would do each morning when he'd go in to start takes was smoke and drink a shot or two of whiskey, hoping that would rough up his voice a little.
Yeah, he was really pushing his voice incredibly hard. And I also heard that he would limit the number of takes that he would do each day over this period because he didn't want to trash himself for the rest of the day. But yeah, it's knowing and understanding that we were all born to sing. And with the advent of the radio and the phonograph, that kind of left our lives. Before that, most middle-class homes had pianos here in the US and Europe, and making music was the family entertainment of the day. And then suddenly it was now we could have world-class singers reproduced in our homes, so we just left singing for the professionals. And as we did that, I think some of the music started to leave our voices as well. And I think rediscovering that and rediscovering the inherent music in your voice is really effective.
I grew up in a musical household. My father was extremely talented and had a tremendous voice. He was one of those guys that When he went to a family wedding, he was generally asked to come up on stage and sing to the bride. He was tremendous. But I put my concentration on the guitar and not singing. So when my father could sing extremely well, I get by. I mean, not even my wife wants to hear me sing. So I get that we could have let that talent go.
Yeah, and it's interesting because having access to listening to and seeing great professionals didn't stop us from wanting to play golf or tennis, right? Tiger Woods actually expanded the game rather than people say I could never play like that. But singing is so personal. And I think when we feel that we don't do it well, that we shouldn't. And I think that's a shame. I actually encourage people to go and take their talk and go somewhere where you feel safe, where no one can hear you, and do something I call the world's worst musical. Just pretend you're in this outrageous musical and sing your presentation. Have fun with it. And then as you're singing, it's like a scene out of Elf, but as you're singing and having fun with your voice, then start to back off the music a little bit, but keep some of it in the voice and start to feel, whoa, I can feel a little bit of melody. I can feel myself play with my tone a little bit, or maybe accent certain words and pull back. All of these devices, again, keep re-engaging the audience's attention.
I love that idea. I've got to try that. That's a great idea.
You should try it. Yeah. And the other thing you can do is, rap artists in hip hop, they are masters at using rhythm and accents to make words pop and to give this propulsion. And just kind of try that in your talk as well. And then just see if you can keep some of that energy and start to find the rhythm in those accents. All of these musical devices can really be helpful.
Those are some great ideas. Hey, what are some of the top mistakes that people make with their voices?
I think the first one is not speaking at your optimal speaking pitch. We generally all have an area where the voice functions best. Some people will speak a little too high, but most people end up speaking a little too low. I think in an attempt to make the voice sound more authoritative, but they'll also maybe speak too low because they're just fatigued or they're not taking care of their voice. So the voice starts to fall down here. And then what happens, in order to get energy out of this lower voice, they end up over muscling and squeezing the vocal cords together with excessive effort. And that can create other problems, irritation on the vocal cords, things such as nodules, which are like little calluses, which can affect our voice. The other mistake is vocal health, not keeping yourself properly hydrated. Your vocal folds or your vocal cords are opening and closing hundreds of times a second. It's remarkably fast. And if they're not properly hydrated, it's their mucosal tissue on the outside. It's like, rubbing your skin together with no lubrication. It's like trying to buzz dry lips, and it can irritate the cords. And you also will get thick mucus on the vocal folds, and then violently clearing it is not good for the voice either. Not getting enough sleep, all of those things. Keeping yourself healthy is going to show up in your voice because it's part of you.
Have you heard what noted speakers and readers are saying about Peter's book, The Captivating Public Speaker? The single most helpful speaking resource I've ever encountered. A framework that elevates you to a superb speaker. A system that is straightforward and guaranteed to improve your public speaking skills. After this episode, please use the link in the show notes to check out The Captivating Public Speaker on Amazon. Now, back to Peter and his guest.
Do people not recognize when we say keeping your voice healthy, that it's something that can become unhealthy?
Yeah, I think because the voice doesn't give you the sensory feedback that other parts of your body do. If you get something in your eye, you know it. You can't ignore it. But the voice, we don't have these nerve endings because we don't necessarily want to feel these hundreds of vibrations a second. But when that also causes us, when we're suffering from fatigue or there's issues with the voice, we don't really feel it. We may just notice, wow, I'm clearing my voice a lot, or my voice is getting really tired, and the underlying issues may be escaping us.
Interesting. What are some of the techniques my listeners can use to connect their inner passion with their listeners? Because I believe that connection is essential.
I like to use something from the acting world, which are emotional intentions. And I find that, let's say you've got to go out and you've got to give a talk to your sales team, and you've got something new to sell, and you want these sales projections. Rather than just thinking a word like excited and trying to create that emotion, an emotional intention would be, what is your goal? What do you want to do? Well, what I want to do is to excite, to inspire. And when you have that very active goal, that can infuse your voice with the passion you're looking for, so that this passion is honest and it's coming from a real place. And then people will hear that in your voice.
Now, a lot of people who do what I do say that giving a talk, a presentation, is not a performance. I believe it has performance in it.
I agree with you. I mean, it's not performance in the purest sense of the word, right? We're not going to get up and start putting on a show and tap dancing, etc. But there is a heightened sense when you are getting up in front of people, or when I do. One of the first things I do when I'm in a space is I will project my sense of self and my energy to all the corners of the room. You want to have this expansive, inclusive energy, and there is a slightly heightened sense. You don't want to come off as hysterical or unhinged, but yes, there's a lifting of energy. There's a lifting of emotional intention. It's certainly different than having a conversation at the water cooler, right? Where it's and because there is give and take. These people have to watch and listen to you without interruption. So you do need to give them a little bit of a show.
What happens when we're doing a longer presentation, maybe an hour to 90 minutes? Does their voice tend to sound tired? And if so, how can we keep that energy up?
One of the best ways to keep that energy up is speaking on the correct pitch, and then also utilizing the power of vocal resonance. The voice is a rather fascinating instrument, and we think that everything's coming from our vocal cords. But actually, the sound that comes from the vocal cords is just kind of like this weak, buzzy sound. It's actually your vocal tract, your throat and your mouth that's enhancing. It's kind of like the guitar amplifier. And so the voice is more just like the unplugged guitar and the vocal cords. Letting resonance do the work, letting resonance create that acoustic energy that's going to takes the load off of the vocal cords so that you're not trying to muscle them all the time.
Can you give an example of resonance?
Sure. So if you just go ahead and give me the word sung, say that for me.
Sung.
Good. I want you to hold that NG. Sung.
Sung.
Good. Now, do that again. I want you to let the pitch float up, and then feel the vibrations. They'll tend to feel like there's a vibration above your soft palate.
Just the NG?
Yeah, just the NG. You feel that? You feel how it gets kind of buzzy?
Yeah, it does.
Now from there, I want you to go, yes, that's right.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, you feel how the voice is real buzzy?
Yes.
Yeah, that's resonance. As opposed to, if I remove resonance from my voice, I start to lose the higher frequencies. So now the voice isn't carrying very well. So I may end up just starting to squeeze my voice in order to be heard more. That's where fatigue comes in.
When you just gave that example of fatigue, the voice you used and letting it just kind of drop, it made me think of cartoons whenever they wanted to show some character, whether it was a dog or whatever the cartoon might have had, that was just kind of da-dun, 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 and moseying along dragging their tail.
Yep.
Because that's the voice they would use on that character.
That's right. They remove the higher frequencies from the voice. Yeah, so you get that kind of dopey sound.
Yeah. You talked about keeping your voice lubricated, and that's while you're speaking. How can we keep it healthy throughout? So not just when we're speaking, not just before we speak, but in general.
Yeah, if you wait until just before you speak to start drinking water, it's a little too late. It takes a little while for systemic hydration to reach your vocal cords. So you should be drinking water hours before. And actually, you want your body to be at a healthy level of hydration all the time. A good rule of thumb is if your urine is more on the pale side, you're usually drinking enough water. They'll talk about 64 ounces a day, at least. It varies from person to person. We're, of course, all different sizes. Our diets, if you're eating a lot of fruits and vegetables and water-rich foods, that can be helpful. Again, sleep is very, very helpful for the voice. Being mindful of where you're using your voice. One of the worst things you can do if you've got a heavy voice use day coming up is to go out drinking the night before in a really loud environment where you're having to shout over everything. That's pretty much guaranteed to leave you hoarse the next day. So just being aware of your overall health. What's good for your body is good for your voice.
What about what our audiences hear, our listeners? When our voice is, let's say, at its prime, do they get a feeling of confidence in us that they might otherwise not get?
Yeah, I think if you feel good about using your voice, it's like walking out with a new set of clothes that you feel really good in. And there's just a certain amount of confidence that they will pick up on. And then when you feel that they're picking up on your confidence, it kind of feeds back to you. So I think everything you do, and I was telling you before we talked, I was going through your book, and you've got these wonderful ways of having people prepare for their presentations. And that is, of course, incredibly important, because if you're not prepared, you're not going to feel confident. But if you're well prepared, you know that you're looking your best and you're sounding your best, you're likely going to have confidence.
Even at an unconscious level with the listener, that comes through. The way you look, the way you're handling yourself, the way you sound. And when they have confidence in us, they have confidence in what we're saying.
We are highly, highly tuned social beings. And you don't have to be an actor to be able to see poor acting on the screen. We're all amazing judges of that. I couldn't judge fine wine in a competition, but we can all pick out inauthentic acting. It's just something that we have. And it's the same when someone's on stage, when they're speaking. You can tell when someone's really authentic. When you see a good speaker and you can just tell there's honest emotion and that they really care, that they're prepared, they know their subject, they have energy, and they're keeping it interesting. You can't help but watch and listen and be swayed and moved by them. I make a joke, but it's actually not so funny, that I don't know of any cult leaders or dictators with poor speaking voices. They use the voice in order to almost hypnotize the masses. So obviously the voice can be used for nefarious reasons as well.
Oh, if you look back in history, especially what we can go back and hear, not just read about, some of the world's greatest leaders were tremendous speakers.
Absolutely. Con artists rarely have dull, boring voices. Con is for confidence, right?
Right. John, one last tip for my listeners. What would it be?
It would be to start fostering an awareness of your voice. Really just looking at, what does my voice feel like at the end of the day? Does it feel healthy, or is it tired and wrung out? Do I feel like people are really listening to me when I talk? When I get up in front of people, do I feel interest start to wander and wane? And do I have techniques to be able to recapture that? A lot of this really is awareness and a real appreciation for the wonder that is the human voice. It's really a miraculous instrument, and I really encourage everyone to get in touch with this wonderful instrument within them.
It's sound advice. John, where can my listeners go and learn more about you and connect with you?
Yeah, my main website is John Henny, JohnHenny.com. And for speakers, it's CompellingSpeaker.com.
Wonderful. John, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
That's a wrap of another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George. Be sure to tune in again for a conversation with another public speaking expert. And remember to use the link in the show notes to go to Amazon and check out Peter's acclaimed book, The Captivating Public Speaker.